So this morning we have a mini plenary from friend Karen Tibbals, and then we'll have a little break, and then we're going to have two panels, one on reaching out and one on welcoming in. So without further ado, we're ready.
Good morning, friends.
Good morning. Good morning.
I do have a Twitter handle. It's @Tibbals, if anybody wants to use it. Let me introduce myself. My name is Karen Tibbals. I am a friend in Broadway Springfield monthly meeting and New York yearly meeting. I'm a relatively recent friend. I joined my meeting the month before I went to Earlham School of Religion for my degree in Quaker Studies. I've been on the fringes of friends for a while, and as I said last night, 10 years ago I hid. 10 years ago I considered leaving friends because I didn't feel welcome. I didn't feel welcome because I have an MBA in marketing. I've done marketing my whole career. I have 30 years of marketing experience working for major multinational firms. I worked for a major advertising agency. And I think we're at a new stage where you could invite someone like me to come and tell you this and stand in front of you. I also have a degree in religion from Earlham School of Religion. I went there from 2012 to 2014 with a concentration in Quaker Studies.
Could you speak a little more slowly? Just for,
Sure. Thank you.
make sure we're catching it all.
So that's a little bit about me. And if you want to read my story, it'll be for my 10 years ago. It will be in Friends Journal in the June-July issue. And slow down.
Karen?
Yes.
I'm Chris. I'm also an MBA, and I have also felt like I need to, I can't be out about that in this community. And the only reason I'm interrupting is to ask, because I think that we often use words that people don't understand. We all use words that people don't understand, and I think that defining terms can be really helpful. So unless it's part of your presentation, and if so, I'm sorry to interrupt, can you define for people what marketing is? Because I think there's a lot of misperception about what that means. Okay.
Okay. What I didn't cover was that the reason I went to ESR was because I felt called in the ministry to start an organization called Quakers in Business, which will have its third meeting this summer, right before our Friends General Conference gathering. The topic this year is spiritual gifts in business practice. We've had about 30 friends for each of the past 2 years. I would invite you, if you're considering going to gathering, or even if you're not, if you want to make a special trip, to come join us. As I said, we've had about 30 people. We're going to have Jan Woods from Northwest give a talk on spiritual gifts, and we'll talk about how we apply them in our business practice. The purpose is to create a welcoming place for friends who have a gift for business. And that's what gives me strength to do this. Okay. So the main ideas I'm going to cover today is a model of how to think about how people learn about and try new products and services. Then I'm going to talk about understanding your target audience. I'm going to talk about how you craft a message for outreach. And then I'm going to talk about the nuts and bolts of crafting a campaign using an example from Google AdWords. And then I'm going to talk about what I see our problems are as I see this being applied. So this is a standard model I learned in my Marketing 101 class. You have to start with awareness. Do you know the name Quaker? Do you know the name Mars Candy Bar? Do you know that name? What associations do you have with that name? Even if you don't know exactly where that came from, and you can't say, oh, I know this for sure. If you have some sort of vague association, that counts. Okay? And a lot of people have a vague association with Quakers, but they don't really know what it is. Confused with Amish, confused with Mennonites, confused with all sorts of things. That counts. That's the awareness stage. So the questions that you need to think about when you think about the awareness stage is, again, do you know the name? Even if you aren't sure, might you have heard something? And what specifically have you heard to the best of your ability can you recall? These are questions that are going on underneath when someone goes through this process without being aware of it. So what this just does is it names what's going on in people. The next stage is attitudes. What do you believe to be true about the product? What impressions do you have? Again, a lot of times they aren't conscious. A lot of times they're deep. You know, I heard something when I was 10 years old and somehow that's still in my brain. How do I uncover that? The next stage is trial. Now that's a big leap for some things, and it's not a big leap for other things. So buying a new candy bar is not a big leap. It's not a big investment. Okay, buying a new washing machine is a big investment. Trying a new faith community, I don't know, who says it's a big investment? Okay. Who says it's not a big investment?
What does the word trying mean?
Right. But for some people, trial is a big deal. But the next step is what we've been talking about being welcoming, is repeat. So what happened when you first tried it? How likely are you to try it again? Why or why not? So what stage do you think most people, most non-members, are at with regards to trying Quakerism on that continuum? Are they at awareness? So we're going to take a vote. Who thinks that the biggest problem facing Quakerism is lack of awareness? Okay. Who says that the problem is attitudes?
Is what?
Attitudes. Who says the problem is trying? Who says the problem is repeat? Okay. So the principle about marketing, and you know what, I never got to that part. I was going to do it today, what marketing is. The principle of marketing is to put your most of your resources towards where the biggest problem is. So it's one thing putting a lot of effort into becoming welcoming, and I'm not saying that's not important, but if your biggest problem is attitudes, then welcoming is not where you spend the most time. Okay? That's just like a fundamental principle of how you allocate your resources. So marketing is letting people know about what you have. And I'll give the talk that I meant to give at the beginning. Marketing is a dirty word for Quakers. And advertising is a dirty word. And I'll give you an example. I've studied history of Quaker businesses, and Cadbury, for many, many years, did not advertise because they did not feel it was appropriate. And one of the things I was going to ask you to do is going to ask you to write down everything bad you thought about for advertising. Because even being in marketing and advertising for 30 years, there are lots of bad things about advertising and marketing that I hate. Okay? And I promise you this, I will not ask you to do any of those things. Because I take very seriously what is said in Quaker history, what George Fox said, let your yea be yea and your nay be nay, which comes directly from the Bible. The part that that Fox didn't say, but what was implied is the next phrase in that. Everything else is from the evil one.
Mm-hmm.
So it is so important to be absolutely truthful. It is so important, and that is where the problem is in marketing. The other thing is a lot of people confuse marketing and selling. So when a salesperson calls you up, that's not a marketer, that's a salesperson. So a lot of our feelings about advertising and marketing come from direct sales. Okay.
Karen,
Yes.
I think there's one other piece of marketing that we have to recognize, which is marketing, when used effectively, gets us to do something that is against our own self-interest many times.
That's manipulative marketing.
But that is how much of marketing works.
Yes, it can do that. But it does that by activating a part of us that is not a good part of us. But it's true for us. It's real for us. If it wasn't real, we wouldn't ever do it. But so we have to be careful about what part of us marketing activates.
Exactly. Which is why paying attention to the second part of the phrase really matters.
So I before we leave the definition stage, I guess I would just say that for me, the marketing function is based on a hypothesis that we have a product that has value. And we are trying to figure out where the consumers of that product are, where they buy, so therefore what channels we distribute through. In the case of a product that's for sale, at what price point, what the competitive products are. It's optimizing that whole process of making the product, in this case Quakerism, available to the target market. And is the target market, you know, a very segmented niche market? Is it a broad mass market thing? These are all questions that candy bar manufacturers and washing machine manufacturers and everybody who's got a product to sell thinks about. But let's think about the fundamental issue. We think that this product has value. Do we think other people think it has value? And how do we find those people? How do we connect with those people?
Absolutely, absolutely. And my career, I said my career was in marketing, my career was in market research, and what I would do is I would find out information about who our target audience were, which we'll go into in a minute, and then I was responsible for making sure that the company I worked for understood who those people were. So I gave those people a voice. So I actually, when I went to seminary, I realized that I had a calling element to it, because I was giving voice to the voiceless.
I would be interested in hearing your opinion on the overlap between marketing and another quicker bad word, evangelicalism.
You know, I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, but we can talk more later too, okay?
Okay, I was hoping you would.
Yes. Okay. So back to my regularly scheduled programming. Target audience, it was brought up before. So when you think about marketing, you have to think about who you're trying, who might be interested in your product. So who might be interested in Quakerism? Is it a niche market, like Chris said, or is it a broad product? Now, I think at its height, Quakerism was about 1% of the population of the UK, so you tell me what you think it's a niche or a broad product. So the best indicator, what we used to do, and what I still do, is the best indicator is you look at the people who are currently involved in your product, the people who are current users, and you look at who they are. And you look specifically at the people who are the most recent people, not the people who know the language, not the people who already bought into it, but you look at the most recent people. And you consider all the options. You need to brainstorm, and this is not an easy task, okay? There's lots of possibilities. Now, I just changed this slide. You don't have this exact slide in your handout. And the reason I did is because this is something that came out of my time at ESR. I had the opportunity to meet Ben Pinkdandel. Everybody know who Ben is?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, for those of you who don't know, he heads the PhD program at the University of Birmingham in England. He is a well-traveled friend in Quaker history. And under his care, there was a third survey done by a PhD student of friends in Britain yearly meeting. And a huge undertaking. And this third one did something different. He did the first one when he was going for his PhD. Mm-hmm. This one was the third one under his care. And they did something different. They did something called a segmentation analysis. Anybody know what a segmentation analysis is?
Well, where you're disaggregating and looking at the data underneath as you see the individual perspectives.
Yeah, so instead of looking at averages, instead of looking at most people said this, you look for specific groups, clusters of people to see what tops, what different groups. And there are, as I remember it, and he tells me I'm wrong, so I take this with a grain of salt. As I remember it, there were 3 segments that they identified, 3 clusters of people. A group that might be called the spiritual seekers or the mystics. If they're not mystics, they're seeking mysticism. The next one is spiritual refugees, and I put some potential subgroups under there. And then the last one is social activists, and I added burnout social activists because burnout social activists have a problem because they're burnout. They want to be social activists and they're burnout. And we'll get to the problem that each one of them might have in a minute. But there's lots of other possibilities, but these are some possibilities that came out of, I believe, came out of Ben's research. Ben's PhD student's research. And I said this to someone, to a group of people 2 years ago, and it has developed a life of its own. So I had to put it in. So you consider all the possibilities, and then you really have to do a deep dive into who they are. You have to really understand them. This is the toughest part, because you have to get outside of yourself. You have to get outside of your own language, you have to get outside of your own assumptions, and you have to truly understand them as they are. And that's a spiritual practice in itself to do that. Some of the questions you should ask yourself is, what do they think about the category? For instance, what do they think about religion? What do they specifically know about Quakers? What is important to them that might relate to being a Quaker? What problems do they have in their life? What are their pain points? So the burnout social activists, they're burnout. They want to do social activism, they can't. And the spirituality might be an answer to them. So what's the pain point? What is the problem? And what do you want them to think about Quakerism after they learn about it? So what are the desired attitudes? When I was at Ogilvy and Mather, the advertising agency, we used to create a before and after picture, a word picture, that would represent what they think about the religion and Quakers now, or the product, or whatever, based on what they know currently. So the before picture, and then a word picture of what you want them to think. Just based on the advertising, not on trying, just based on the advertising. What would get them to try it? Something that would get them to change the attitudes. And I'm focusing on attitudes here because we said that was the big problem. And I personally think that's the big problem. You need to tell them their pain point can be solved. And that will get them to try. Once you know what that change is that you want, then you can try to figure out what will get them there. What things could you say? It has to be true. Let your yea be yea and your nay be nay. Anything else is from the evil one. And it also has to be compelling. And it has to be compelling to those people. It's not what you think. It's what they think. What's your criteria for success? Clearly understood and concise. No jargon. None. None, none. Simple words. Repeat again. Easily understood. Has to be unique. Only you. One iteration I saw from one monthly meeting sounded like it was from a social justice organization. Another one sounded like it could have been a Unitarian Universalist. What's unique? Needs to be believable. Needs to be compelling. You have to go to the pain point. What problem are you solving? This isn't easy. Don't try this at home, kids. It takes multiple iterations in time. And then it needs to get agreement. Iteration after iteration, and you're going to run into a language problem. So here's a suggestion, Greg, to draw on the rich heritage of Quaker-style evangelism in the early days. Quaker-style evangelism wasn't, you'll be saved. Quaker-style evangelism is you can have a relationship with God. You can be there with God. Quakers were insanely persistent evangelists in the early days. We are not. We are not. Deborah Williams, in her book, Quakerism and Theology for Our Times, goes on at length about this topic. It's a very good book. This is a management thinker by the name of Simon Sinek. He says if you want to be a leader, you have to tell people why, not just what they need to do, how they need to do it, they need to tell you why. That applies to marketing. The why is the pain point, but this is another way to think about how to approach it. So why should people want to be Quaker?
It's also, I think, important to remember here Adam Smith's theory, which applies not just to economics, but to faith, and that is we all operate out of self-interest. So the why often has to do with that point of self-interest.
Right, right. So that's like the theory. I'm going to get much more concrete. So I guess I want to stop here and ask if there's any questions. Yeah. Greg?
Something I found in living and being among different Quaker meetings across the country and types of Quaker meeting is unless you are not a national organization, I think the message that my meeting would have would probably look different from Durham Main meeting and from Beacon Hill meeting. So I think that is a mistake I've seen in Quaker marketing. Is thinking, oh, what they are doing in New York City, we can just copy it word by word for rural Ohio, and it doesn't work.
Yeah, it has to be true. It has to be true for you. It has to be true for what you're offering. You're offering your meeting. You're not offering the meeting in Beacon Hill. You're not offering the meeting in Plainfield, New Jersey. You are offering whatever your meeting is.
I guess, can you go back one slide? Point number 3 looks to me like it could be a sticking point for us. We need to have agreement. I think we have to decide who is the firm marketing the product. Is it the monthly meeting? In which case, Durham, Maine can decide what their product is and go out and sell people on that. Beacon Hill monthly meeting can articulate its value proposition and sell people on that. That's all fine, but in a way, we're operating like a franchised business, right?
That's exactly right.
And one of the things that makes a franchise work, the Society of Friends or McDonald's or Jiffy Lube or whatever it is the notion of standards and consistency, so that if you have a campaign that's marketing to people who need an oil change or a mystical community-based faith community in Maine, they're going to walk into a meeting house and get the same product that they would if they walked into one in Boston or, potentially, well, let's talk about New England, in Boston or in Connecticut or Rhode Island. That there needs to be at least something that is clearly cohesive and repeatable across those different product experiences. And I think that's an issue.
Okay, so there's two models of how religious organizations are organized, and one of which is the franchise model, and the other is the congregational model. Quakers are more the congregational model, where there's a lot of diversity at the lower end, and then there's a building thing where everybody doesn't agree, but you get a consistency. So I would disagree with you that we're more of a franchise. I think we're more of a congregational model.
I don't disagree with that, but I'm saying to have an ad campaign for Quakerism in New England, across New England, we need to have some agreement on what is the thing we're all contributing
If
towards.
that's how you decide to proceed, to go a New England campaign. If you do individual monthly campaigns, that's a different thing. So it depends on how you're approaching this and it's what you can do. But you also have to keep in mind the target audience. So you run into a language problem that, people don't know what the light is, so you can't use the light. So I just heard an interview with Carrie Newcomer, and Krista Tippett was asking her about her use of the word light in her songs, which we all know is a word for God or the divine or whatever your language is. But Krista Tippett had to ask her what it meant.
Right.
So that's not a word you can use. And maybe we could agree on light, we can't agree on God. So we have a real problem with this agreement, which is why it's a bullet point on this slide, and it's a huge issue. So the world you're stepping into when you do outreach, you're running into a bunch of landmines here. I saw a hand.
Yes, a question more to ponder than for you to have to answer immediately, but on evangelism, which can be a sticky and toe-stubbing word for a lot of people, agreed that it was very much alive for early friends, and that the kernel of the evangelistic message was you can have a direct relationship with God. I think evangelism has to speak, I would think, to the pain point. It has to be true, but it also has to speak to the audience. And I just am wondering, for our consideration today, whether that pain point and message can be the same, because for early friends, there was a great deal of pain about a relationship with God because the Middle Ages and the history had been of a mediated relationship. And I wonder if today people have a lot more confidence about that. They don't doubt that they can have a relationship with God, and that it's a slightly, the evangelistic message would be a little different, I think. I think it's about being empowered. But a question for consideration.
You go back to the target audience, find out. You don't make assumptions. That's a great hypothesis, but you test your hypothesis. And that was my job. It was coming up with what does the target audience think? It's not an easy thing. Did a lot of work on that. A lot of work.
You say we, and I want to define what you mean by we. When you say we do not evangelize, are you talking specifically about liberal, unprogrammed friends in the Northeast?
I don't even think Midwestern friends who I traveled among evangelized. So I would take it a little bit broader than that.
And the category are for friends that call themselves the evangelical friends. Do you consider them?
I don't have enough experience with them to comment on that. I've spent time among in the Midwest, but not.
So, for those of you who don't know, I'm one of New England's representatives to the Friends United Meeting Board, and we consider ourselves an evangelical organization. And if we hold a theme in common, which is a huge assumption, it is let your lives speak. So if we are living with God at the center, are we not, in fact, all living examples of what Quakers are? So that's another way of asking this question. Who is the target audience? We are the target audience. Does that mean we want to replicate ourselves? For some of our meetings, replication means a dilution of rather than an expansion of our gifts.
Eric, and then I'm going to have to call it off.
Yeah.
I want some stuff to get through.
Absolutely. I just wanted to make a comment that, and also hold you up for a moment in that, there's nothing in this world that can't be done faithfully. It doesn't matter what it is, if it's marketing, if it's sales, it doesn't matter what it is. Everything can be done faithfully. And I'm reminded of John Woolman, as we're sitting here, who was a businessman and who lived his faith through business. And so I just, I want to thank you for presenting this as you're going to continue presenting it and sharing your knowledge with us. And I just think it's worth all of us remembering that there's nothing that can't be done faithfully. And there's no avenue we can't, I don't think that we can't approach if we keep that in mind.
Thank you for that. Very great.
Just two words. Can we also consider, when we use the word pain point, also think of joy point? Would it not be the flip side of the same coin?
You're not solving a joy point. You have to solve a problem. You may solve it with the joy point, but you're not solving a joy point. People don't do something unless you solve a problem for them. They have to believe you're going to solve a problem. Okay. I love joy point, but it's not the one. Sorry.
Friends, Karen, this is so rich and so wonderful and so alive. Karen's going to be offering an interest group, so that's one way to continue it, or maybe a separate lunch table, but given the time constraints and Mira's bringing a snack over soon, maybe Karen kind of like zoom through the rest of her thought process.
The rest of it gets really practical, and you have all the slides except for one, so you can. So I'm just going to give you like an orientation to what it is, what kinds of things you need to think about. So visuals. A lot of times we get carried away with visuals because they're pretty pictures, and we choose it because it's pretty. You don't choose a visual because it's pretty. You choose it because it reinforces the concept behind the words, or vice versa. You can start with a visual that, it's perfectly fine to start with a visual that communicates your message and find words to go with a visual. Either one could be the start, but they need to reinforce each other. They need to work together. They can't counteract each other. Visuals need to be versatile. It can't be such that it can only be used in one form of media. It needs to be consistent across the media. That gives you power when you have that consistency. The campaign, every outreach effort has to be considered as part of developing the message. They all have to be consistent, 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 consistent. Every piece should have a clear role. You should know what the point is of everything you do. That doesn't mean everything needs to be identical. You can build a message that's more complicated by using multiple mediums. So I'll give you a very crude example. Tastes great, less filling has 2 messages for the beer, okay? One year they would do tastes great, the next year they would do less filling, and they'd rotate it. So they used multiple different messages. Because you have to be simple, you have to be concise, you can't get too complicated in any one piece, which is a huge discipline to do that. So you need to rely on different pieces to carry different parts of the message, okay? So you could take the website, you could take a sign, you could take your bulletin or your welcome packet, and the advertising, and mix and match what you put in there, keeping each piece simple, keeping it consistent in how it looks in the message, but building the whole message over time. Again, you need to think about how each one fits. So here's some examples of how the advertising sign might work for awareness, the website and the sign might work towards attitudes, the welcome packet is going to play a key role of this step between trial and repeat. There's other parts. Somebody call you. That can be a part of what goes from trial and repeat. What happens in the meeting? What happens in coffee hour? That's all part of what happens. For part of your message is what happens in coffee hour. Media. So I've called out a few media that I think are particularly appropriate for Quakers. Google listing is free, absolutely free. I did it for my meeting. Google AdWords, Google's offering grants of $10,000 a month to pay for Google AdWords. Okay, and I'll go into what that means in a minute. What it does is it gets your search result on top, and I'll give you an example of that. Friends Journal has done that, and I'll show you the Friends Journal example. And you can set up a campaign based on geographic boundaries, such as using zip codes, state boundaries, etc. You can also do purchase media, like I said, the NPR campaign that a group I know is considering. And publicity is another element that doesn't cost you anything, it just costs you time or expertise. So here's some Google AdWords results. Who's done a search on Google? Okay, let's grab everybody. So then this looks pretty familiar. So here's a search I did at home for the keyword Quaker. The first listing that isn't paid that came up is my meeting. Now it came up first because I listed it on Google. Okay, that's the only reason. Before I did that, it did not come up like this. Okay, that's important. The only ad, there's 2 ads on this page. One is the Friends Journal ad, and I'll give you more detail on that in a minute. And then all the way to the right, you see Quaker Oats has bought the word Quaker.
And Quaker Steak and Lube.
Yes, yes. But they might not have bought it in my zip code. I also did a search for Quaker, specifically adding some geography, Cambridge, Mass. So Friends Meeting in Cambridge came up, as did Fresh Ponds, and Friends Meeting in Cambridge also must have listed because here we have a picture. So they didn't pay for that, they did that free from listing their organization on Google. Same thing with Quaker Amherst, Mass. Woolman Hill comes up, second after Mount Toby. And Mount Toby must be listed. Here's a page that explains the Google grant campaign to offer you $10,000. You have to apply for it to meet certain criteria. From what I read, every single organization here would meet that criteria. So, there are 3 parts to the Google Ads campaign. And this isn't from my background, this isn't from my marketing background, this is from an effort, my expertise in this is from an effort I did for Powerhouse. I'm on the Powerhouse committee, and I've done this a few times for Powerhouse. There are three parts to a Google AdWords campaign. There's the search terms or the keywords. So you saw Quaker and what you get, okay? Then there's the ad, and you saw the Friends Journal ad, and what it said was Quaker Thought and Life, friendsjournal.org. So that's the headline and the URL. And then underneath it, it said, a faith of simplicity, justice, and peace. Find it in Friends Journal. And then there's the landing page. So if you click on the headline, where does it go?
Friends Journal.
And I'll show you where it goes in a minute. I'll show you now. That's where it goes.
And the invitation is right there.
Well, but think about what it said. A faith of simplicity, justice, and peace. There's nothing on here about a faith of simplicity, justice, and peace. There's no consistency. This assumes you know what a faith of justice and simplicity is, and assumes you want to subscribe. So, sorry to be critical, those of you from Friends Journal. Yes?
Oh, no, never mind.
Okay.
I was thinking that the faithful living.
Right, it was the cover. It
Yeah.
was the image.
But they could have done a lot more.
Yeah.
They could have done a lot more. Okay. So, as I said, there's three parts to the Google AdWords campaign. So, there's the keywords, the ad wording, and the landing page content. And you need to think about it for each target audience. The great thing about doing this is you can do it for a lot of different target audiences. You can have a lot of different messages. And people spend a huge amount of time developing these and testing them. And that's the other great thing. You can test them. So here I've done a bunch of examples. I'm not going to go through them because you have them there and you can read them. I'm going to show you what happened in a campaign that I did. Well, first of all, this is how you use this is how you find out how popular keywords are. So you can use the Google AdWords tool to look for the keywords, and it tells you how many searches there were each month for different keywords. And here's another one that's lower. Here I looked for gay Christians. That's how many searches there were in that particular month for those particular words. Versus for spirituality, much higher numbers. Then you choose your geography by zip code or DMA or state. Here's the zip code. Here's the considerations that I was using for Pal House, Bennington, Vermont, because it's pretty close. Massachusetts, because it's right over the state line. New York, because it's right over the state line. So you can see the city and the state options. Do individual zip codes, that can get, if you're in a small area, zip codes would work really well. And then you build the campaign. You have the ad group, which is the wording of the ads. And then you have to decide what your cost per click is. How much you're willing to spend for each click. And then here you can see for this ad group 1, there were 112 clicks with 26,000 impressions. The next one I did, which was for a specific retreat, I had 32 clicks, 11,000.
What are the impressions?
The numbers of times it appeared on the screen. So somebody did a search for spirituality, let's say. How many times did my ad appear on that page for a person who did that search? And then how many times did they click through? So you get a very small percentage of people clicking through. Very small.
Is this unique clicks and unique impressions?
Unique clicks. Well, actually, it's not. Okay. It could be. And we didn't get anybody to click through to buy out of those 112. Okay.
And that's always one of the things but it's not the only reason you do this.
Right.
If awareness is part of your campaign, this goes back to awareness.
Right. This is how you build this Google AdWords campaign. Is a great way to build awareness at a relatively low cost, because after all, it's going to be free if you get a grant. Now I paid for this with Pal House money, but And then you monitor your impressions, your click-throughs, and your cost per click. Let's see. Okay, so last, you have tools. Purchase media, talked about that a little bit. Consider the reach frequency, your cost per thousand. You buy a large city, you're going to get a lot more people, so it's going to cost you more, but your cost per thousand isn't a lot more. I was talking to someone who was considering buying a big city and say, oh, we can't afford that, we're going to go for a small city. Like, you're not going to get as many people. Is that what you want? Think about it. And they want to raise more money. And then you have to think about how well does it reach your target audience. To pick media that's going to reach your target audience. Publicity is the hardest to stay on message. You don't have control. But usually it's built around events. So are your events on message? And should you have events specifically for your target audience so you can build publicity, so you can build this whole thing? I'll close with the problems. We don't have a clear picture of who we are because there's such diversity of friends and what we believe. A lot of times we talk about what we aren't, not what we are. We're diverse, we're accepting and tolerant, and we feel ambivalent about evangelizing. But I think that tide is turning. But I think I'll pose a theological problem. Early Quakers thought their work was to bring about the kingdom of God on earth, which I truly believe in. So should we be spending time evangelizing for new Quakers to bring about that kingdom? Or should we be evangelizing social justice? I think sometimes people come down on the side of evangelizing social justice instead of evangelizing faith. So my personal answer, the work itself is up to God. We need to live into the kingdom, and part of our job is to find new workers. Thank you.